I've listened to all your statements, each one of them. And I'm truly sorry to everyone I've heard. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Defense submitted.
Yes. As he has desired since the beginning of this case, Mr. DeAngelo has accepted responsibility for his crimes by pleading guilty, has even admitted uncharged crimes. He's now prepared to be. Thank you,
Mr. Kress. Reference to Sacramento Probation Department for pre-sentence investigation report was waived at the time of plea, and the 1203.C report was requested or will be requested. Courts also considered the sentencing memorandums submitted by the defense as well as the people. With respect to the approval of this disposition, the court approves of this plea. I have considered the comments of counsel, the facts in this case, as well as the overall circumstances of this disposition. I've considered the defendant's age, the fact there are inmates currently on death row and have been so for 30 years. I have considered the fact that there is currently a moratorium on the death penalty in California. Furthermore, this disposition does give survivors and their loved ones an opportunity to have their words heard, not to endure the unimaginable emotions that they would experience by sitting through such a trial. Finally, with this resolution, the California taxpayers have been saved tens of millions of dollars. For the reasons stated, the court approves of this plea. However, the court is not saying that Mr. DeAngelo does not deserve to have the death penalty imposed. It merely means the court feels it would never come to pass. In truth, all the parties should be commended in reaching this resolution, for the result of this trial and a plea of guilty is the same. Mr. DeAngelo will spend the rest of his natural life and ultimately meet his death confined behind the walls of a state penitentiary. I generally don't make comments at sentencing, but I am going to make an exception. Having approved of this plea, I will now move on to the imposition of sentence. Mr. DeAngelo, I've listened for the last 3 days from the people you've terrorized and their friends and their family. Their impact statement will always be with me. I was moved by their courage, their grace, their strength, all qualities you clearly lack. I know whatever words I say today will pale in comparison to the words the survivors have spoken. They need to be said. The fundamental principle of law that justice delayed is justice denied is no truer than in this case. But for the dogged persistence and perseverance of law enforcement, their survivors, their families, and citizen detectives, this case may have remained unsolved. There are many heroes like Carol Daly, Paul Holes, Michelle McNamara, and many heroes that I don't even know that brought this day here. And I have little doubt but for the tenacity and unwavering quest for justice exhibited by Sacramento District Attorney's Office, Anne-Marie Schubert, you may have escaped earthly justice altogether. If I listened to the survivors and I've watched you, I could not help but wondering, what are you thinking? Are you capable of comprehending the pain and anguish you have caused? To quote the great American novelist and California native John Steinbeck, to a man born without a conscience, a soul-stricken man must seem ridiculous. To a criminal, honesty is foolish. You must not forget that a monster is merely a variation, and that to a monster, the norm is monstrous. Mr. Steinbeck seems to think that monsters are born and not created. I'm not so sure, but one thing I do know, when a person commits monstrous acts, they need to be locked away or they can never harm another innocent person. It is my sincere hope that with the opportunity to be heard these last few days and the sentence to be imposed, the survivors will find some resolution, find some peace, and hopefully find some justice, however imperfect. Mr. DeAngelo, I sentence you to the following: Count one, the charge of murder in the first degree of Claude Snelling, a violation of Penal Code Section 187. The court hereby sentences the defendant to imprisonment for life. By operation of law, the minimum parole eligibility for this offense is 7 years. Regarding the weapon enhancement, that in the course of that murder, that you personally used a firearm, a violation of Penal Code Section 1222.5, the court imposes a sentence of not less than 5 years to run concurrent with a sentence just imposed for the first degree murder of Claude Snelling. Count one will run concurrent with a sentence to be announced in count two by operation of law. Count two, for the charge of murder in the first degree of Katie Majori, a violation of Penal Code Section 187, and in conjunction with the multiple murder special circumstance Penal Code 190.2 (a) 3 and Penal Code Section 190.2 (c) 5, this court hereby sentences the defendants to life without the possibility of parole.